The fog clung to the streets like a forgotten promise, thick and whispering secrets Lily couldn't quite hear. She pulled her coat tighter, her footsteps echoing hollowly on the cracked pavement, each one a reluctant admission of her solitude. Why had she come to this God-forsaken town? The thought looped in her mind, a silent mantra of regret as the mist swirled around her legs like spectral fingers grasping for warmth she no longer possessed. Her breath plumed in the chill air, fragile as the memories she buried deep, a laugh from another life now silenced. But tonight the quiet felt heavier, watchful, as if the fog hid eyes that followed her every hesitant step, stirring a primal unease in her chest. The town crouched under a perpetual shroud, its narrow streets winding like veins through a body long drained of life. Shuttered storefronts gaped like empty sockets, their windows smeared with grime that caught the faint glow of rusted street lamps, casting elongated shadows that twisted into predatory shapes. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and rotting leaves carried from the dense forest that pressed against the town's edges like an uninvited lover, its branches clawing at the sky. Lily shivered as a gust rustled the skeletal trees, their leaves whispering threats she couldn't decipher. The isolation mirroring the void inside her, a hollow where grief echoed unchecked. Farther out, abandoned cabins dotted the tree line, their roofs sagging under the weight of unspoken histories, and in the distance, a lone howl pierced the night. Not quite animal, not quite wind, hinting at something ancient and hungry lurking just beyond sight. Inside the cabin, the door clicked shut like a final breath, sealing Lily in with the silence that had become her constant shadow. She moved through the dim room on autopilot, fingers trailing over the cold locks, twist, check, twist again, as if the metal could hold back the flood of memories pressing against her skull. The air smelled of stale coffee and pine cleaner, a sterile veil over the ache that gnawed at her chest, unspoken and unrelenting. Why did everything feel so heavy now? Her reflection in the darkened window caught her eye, a ghost with hollow cheeks and eyes that refused to meet their own gaze, and she turned away sharply, clutching the edge of the counter until her knuckles whitened. Flashes intruded unbidden, a hand she once held now gone, leaving only this numbness, this paralyzed drift where grief whispered but never screamed. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass breath fogging the pain, and for a moment the world outside blurred into nothing but then a prickle along her spine as if the fog itself were breathing, watching, waiting for her to crack. Her heart stuttered fear mingling with the void, but she stayed frozen, too weary to cry, too guarded to call out into the night. Stepping onto the porch, the wooden planks creaking under her weight like old bones protesting the cold, Lily froze as a glint pierced the fog-amber eyes, steady and luminous, staring from the forest's maw. They belonged to something large, shadowed its form. A silhouette of muscle and caution, the German shepherd's gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that sent her pulse thundering. Was it threat or plea? The air thickened, carrying a faint scent of wet fur and earth, and then a low whine escaped the darkness, not aggressive, but laced with a haunting vulnerability that echoed her own hidden wounds. She stood transfixed, fear coiling in her gut, yet pulling her forward, as if those eyes promised a rupture in her isolation, a whisper of change amid the shadows. The memories came unbidden like ghosts, slipping through cracks in the fog-bound town. Lily had once lived in a sunlit world far from this shadowed exile, a place where laughter echoed off walls, painted in vibrant hues, and hands intertwined without fear of letting go. She saw it now in fragments, the curve of a smile that mirrored her own, the warmth of arms that had promised forever until one rain-slicked night when sirens wailed and everything shattered like glass underfoot. The loss had been a blade carving out pieces of her, until only the shell remained her heart, a locked chamber where grief paced endlessly, whispering regrets of words unsaid and moments unlived. She had fled to this town not for healing but for numbness, hoping the distance would mute the echoes. But in the quiet hours, the past resurfaced, flashes of a shared coffee mug, now cold and solitary. The scent of familiar cologne carried on the wind, twisting her gut. Her vitality had drained away with that final goodbye, leaving a woman who moved through life like a shadow detached and adrift, her caution, a fortress built from the rubble of what was. Why did she stay? The question haunted her internal monologue, a loop of self-doubt, mingling with the ache of isolation, as if admitting the pain would make it real again. Yet in this new desolation, the fog seemed to stir those buried wounds, forcing her to confront the emptiness that mirrored the town's forsaken streets. The contrast was stark once she had danced under stars full of promise. Now she wandered alone, a vessel cracked and leaking light, searching unconsciously for something, anything to anchor her, before she dissolved entirely into the mist. Dawn crept into the cabin like an unwelcome intruder, filtering through curtains drawn tight against the world. Lily rose mechanically, her body a puppet on strings of habit brewing coffee that tasted of ashes as she stared at the steam rising like forgotten dreams. The routine was her cage check, the doors scroll through empty notifications on her phone, avoid the mirror that reflected a stranger's hollow eyes, each action a deliberate numbing a shield against the void that threatened to swallow her whole. The cabin's walls bare and echoing amplified her isolation, the creak of floorboards the only conversation in her frozen existence. She worked remotely, fingers dancing over keys in a rhythm devoid of passion, her mind drifting to safer blanks while grief lurked in the peripheries, unacknowledged but ever present. Evenings blurred into the same, a solitary meal, the hum of the refrigerator a mocking companion as she curled on the couch with a book she barely read, pages turning like days slipping away. The town's oppressive silence seeped in, mirroring her inner paralysis, a life on pause, disconnected from the pulse of connection she once craved. Her caution manifested in small defenses, jumping at shadows, triple-locking the door, as if physical barriers could contain the emotional torrent she dared not unleash. In these moments, her internal voice whispered accusations of cowardice, yet she persisted in the numbness, the routine a fragile armor against the chaos of feeling anything at all. In the shadowed fringes of the town where the forest swallowed light like a starving beast, Echo prowled with the ghosts of his past clinging to his scarred hide. His coat, once a sleek black and tan armor, was now matted and patchy, etched with pale lines from chains that had bitten deep during nights of endless rain and forgotten howls. Betrayal had been his cradle, owned by a man who vanished under whispers of foul play. Echo had learned trust as a fragile illusion, shattered by fists that fell like thunder and voices that promised safety only to deliver pain. His eyes, amber pools rimmed with caution, scanned the world with a predator's sharpness, flinching at the crack of branches that echoed old strikes, his body coiling low as if the ground itself might rise against him. Survival was his creed, scavenging scraps from dumpsters reeking of decay, dodging stones thrown by fearful townsfolk who saw only a stray menace in his muscular frame. Yet beneath the growl that rumbled like distant storms, a flicker of loyalty lingered, a remnant from days when a kind hand had stroked his ears before the darkness claimed his world. His scars weren't just skin deep. They mapped a soul fractured by abandonment, each limp from an untreated wound, a testament to resilience forged in isolation. Now drawn to Lily's cabin by an inexplicable pull, he watched from the tree line, his breath steady, but his heart a wary drum mirroring her own hidden fractures. The town's fog seemed to weave through his fur, amplifying his haunting presence, a guardian born of betrayal. His protective instincts a silent scream against the void that had nearly consumed him. In quiet moments he'd pause, head tilted toward the wind, carrying her scent, a whine escaping his throat like a plea for the connection he both craved and feared his body. A vessel of pain that paralleled her grief, waiting for the moment when shadows might finally align. Lily felt it first as a prickle on her skin, that unseen gaze from the fog mirroring the emptiness that echoed in her chest like a hollow wind through abandoned halls. Echo's presence lingered at the edges of her awareness, his amber eyes catching the lamplight like distant stars in a void, each glance a silent acknowledgement of shared desolation. She caught glimpses of him during her nocturnal walks, his form a dark silhouette against the mist scars glinting faintly, his posture a wary crouch that reflected her own guarded stance against the world. In those moments her internal monologue stirred with reluctant empathy. Why does he watch? Is his loneliness as vast as mine, a shadow stretching from betrayal to this forsaken place? Their wounds aligned invisibly, her suppressed grief, a quiet storm that paralleled his flinching at shadows, both retreating into fortresses of mistrust built from the rubble of lost bonds. A hesitant glance exchanged across the street, his ears perking slightly before flattening mirrored her fleeting curiosity quashed by fear. A nonverbal dance of recognition where pain spoke louder than words. As nights blurred, she began leaving scraps on the porch, not out of pity, but a subconscious pull watching from the window as he approached with tentative steps, his muzzle sniffing the air like testing fragile ice. The parallelism deepened her avoidance of mirrors, echoed his aversion to sudden lights, both scarred souls orbiting each other in the town's oppressive quiet, their mutual emptiness a canvas for tentative strokes of trust. In the fog's embrace, their arcs intertwined subtly hesitations, giving way to prolonged stares. A low whine from him, answered by her soft sigh, laying the groundwork for a bond forged in mirrored voids, where healing whispered from the shadows they both inhabited. The sky cracked open like a wound, unleashing a torrent that blurred the line between earth and fury. Lily stumbled through the forest's grasping arms branches, whipping her face like accusations from the past, the rain pounding her skin with icy needles that seeped into her bones. Her breath came in ragged gasps, the fog thickening into a chaotic veil carrying the metallic tang of ozone and wet soil that choked her lungs. Why had she ventured out? The question hammered in her mind, mingling with the thunder's roar, her caution fracturing under the storm's assault as visibility dwindled to shadows dancing in the deluge. Then amid the chaos, a form materialized, Echo the German shepherd, his fur plastered like a sodden cloak, amber eyes cutting through the haze with unyielding steadiness. He stood at the path's edge, not fleeing but planted his massive frame, a barrier against the wind's howl, muscles tensed beneath scars that gleamed slickly. The shock hit her like lightning, those eyes once distant watchers now close enough to reflect her terror, his presence amplifying the urgency as lightning illuminated his protective stance. Rain streamed from his muzzle, a low rumble escaping his throat, not threat, but warning, as if he sensed the storm's deeper malice, the sensory barrage heightening her pulse to a frantic drum. In that frozen instant, the world narrowed to him, a guardian forged from shadows, his soaked form a visceral anchor in the tempest's grip. Lily's knees buckled in the mud, her hands trembling as she faced Echo, the storm's rage a mirror to the turmoil churning within her. Run her mind screamed logic, a sharp blade cutting through the empathy that threatened to bloom. Why risk this when caring had only ever led to loss? His eyes held hers wary, yet imploring, rain tracing paths along his scarred muzzle like tears she refused to shed, stirring a conflict that twisted her gut. Compassion welled unbidden, a warm flicker against the cold fear of vulnerability, her internal argument raging. He's just a stray broken like you, walk away, preserve the numbness. But a subtle shift in his posture, a slight tilt of the head, ears flattening not in aggression, but need, pierced her defenses, empathy overriding the logic that had armored her heart for so long. The wind howled accusations of her past isolation, yet his trembling form, soaked and steadfast, tipped the scales, a silent plea that echoed her own hidden cries for connection. The storm's fury seemed to pause as Lily's hand extended, trembling like a leaf in the gale, her fingers uncurling slowly toward Echo's sodden form. Mud squelched under her knees as she knelt, the rain a relentless drum on her back, each drop a reminder of the vulnerability she courted. "What am I doing?" Her mind raced, but the words dissolved into action, her voice emerging soft and coaxing. "Come on, boy, it's okay." A plea wrapped in commitment she couldn't retract. Echo's ears twitched, his body rigid as stone, amber eyes flickering with the wariness of one betrayed too often. Yet he didn't bolt his paws, shifting slightly, testing the invisible bridge she offered. The wind howled around them, branches cracking like breaking resolves. But in that suspended moment, her gesture became irreversible, a hand outstretched not just to a dog, but to the fracture in her own guarded heart. He inched forward, muzzle low, sniffing the air thick with petrichor and her fear-scented resolve, his cautious reaction a mirror to her internal shift from the safety of indecision to the raw edge of connection. Lightning flashed, illuminating the scars on his flank, like maps of shared suffering sealing her choice in electric clarity. No turning back now, she thought the commitment a quiet thunder in her chest as his nose brushed her fingertips tentative and real. Guiding Echo through the storm's fading wrath, Lily's steps were deliberate, her hand hovering near his shoulder without touch, respecting the invisible chasm of his mistrust. The cabin loomed ahead like a sanctuary carved from shadows, its door creaking open to spill warm light into the night, a beacon against the rain's relentless assault. Inside, the air shifted thick with the scent of wet fur and pine floors, the drip-drip from their forms pooling like shed fears as she moved slowly, fetching a towel worn soft from disuse, offering it not as command, but invitation. Echo hesitated at the threshold, his paws leaving muddy prints like hesitant signatures on a packed eyes darting to corners as if expecting betrayal's ambush. She knelt again, voice a murmur lost in the thunder's echo. "You're safe here." The words of vow etched in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. Gradually, he stepped in, body low and tense, but when she placed a bowl of water rippling like her unsteady resolve, he approached, lapping tentatively, his gaze lifting to meet hers in a flicker of acknowledgement. The silent bond wove itself in that moment, her offering space by the hearth flames crackling like nascent hope while he settled in the corner, not close, but present, his breathing sinking with the storm's retreat. Healing whispered in the air, fragile as frost on glass, a promise made without words, mutual refuge in a world of tempests, their wounds beginning to knit under the cabin's watchful roof. As the rain softened to a patter, Lily's internal monologue softened too. Maybe this is how we mend one cautious step at a time, the dog's first signs of trust a mirror to her budding openness. The cabin's air hung thick with unspoken tension, the hearth's flicker casting long shadows that danced like wary specters across the wooden floors. Echo claimed the farthest corner, his body curled into a tight coil of muscle and mistrust amber eyes, tracking Lily's every move with the precision of a sentinel guarding forbidden ground. A low growl rumbled from his chest when she shifted too quickly, not aggressive, but a clear boundary etched in sound, his scars glistening faintly in the firelight like reminders of bridges burned. Lily respected the invisible line, her movements deliberate and slow, placing a bowl of kibble at arm's length, retreating to her chair without a word, her internal monologue a whirl of patience and doubt. "He's here, but not yet with me." His walls mirror mine, tall and unyielding. The silence stretched between them, a shared language of caution, neither daring to breach the chasm forged by their pasts. She sat with a book unopened in her lap, stealing glances at his rigid form, the rise and fall of his flanks a metronome to her own guarded breaths. No initiations, no demands, just the quiet acknowledgement of presence, the cabin's creaks filling the void where words might have intruded. In this cold distance, their bond simmered unseen, a fragile ember waiting for the right spark, his guarded looks meeting her hesitant ones in fleeting moments that hinted at the thawing to come. Lily's gaze fell on the gash along Echo's paw, a raw line crusted with dirt and silent suffering mirroring the invisible scars that laced her heart. She approached with the gentleness of one handling fragile glass, a cloth soaked in warm water, held out like an olive branch, her voice a soft murmur lost in the cabin's hush. "Let me help." Echo's eyes narrowed, body tensing as she knelt at a respectful distance, the air thick with the scent of antiseptic and wet fur, his low whine an echo of vulnerability that tugged at her own suppressed grief. Their pains intertwined in that moment, her fingers trembling as memories of loss surfaced, unbidden flashes of hands she could no longer hold, while he watched from his corner, wary but observant, his tail still as stone. Slowly she dabbed at the wound, the cloth coming away stained with the remnants of his trials. And though he flinched at first, he didn't pull away his amber stare, softening into something akin to recognition. Sharing food followed a simple act. She placed scraps of meat on the floor between them, eating her own meal in silence, the crackle of the fire underscoring their mirrored solitude. He inched closer, muzzle sniffing tentatively, lapping up the offering. Without haste, his presence a quiet bridge over the chasm of isolation. In this unspoken communion, connection bloomed through the haze of hurt their wounds, a common ground, where trust began to root subtle and profound. The clatter of a fallen cup shattered the cabin's hushed porcelain shards, scattering like fragments of forgotten lives, jolting Lily into a vortex of memory. Her hand froze mid-reach, eyes glazing as the past surged forth a similar crash in another home. Laughter turning to screams, the irrevocable snap of connections severed by fate's cruel hand. Echo flinched at the noise, his body coiling low, a guttural whine escaping as his own ghost stirred chains rattling in the dark, a master's voice twisting from affection to rage, leaving him chained and howling into the void. The parallel struck silently, their eyes meeting in a charged pause. Lily's breath hitched her internal monologue, whispering recognition. His pain echoes mine, a chain broken yet binding us in shared fracture. A gentle gesture followed her hand, extending a treat palm upturned like an open wound, and Echo hesitated, nostrils flaring, but didn't recoil, his head lowering in tentative acceptance. The moment bridged their histories, the cup's remnants swept away as emotional threads wove tighter, nonverbal cues, forging a link where words failed. No longer adversaries in solitude, they paused together, the air humming with the weight of unveiled vulnerabilities, a step toward mending without utterance. Sunlight pierced the cabin's curtains like tentative fingers, casting a golden haze that softened the edges of their shared space, igniting the first embers of joy in the hearth's glow. Lily, moved by an unbidden impulse, retrieved an old tennis ball from a dusty shelf, its faded green, a relic of lighter days, and rolled it gently across the floor, a simple act, laced with hope. Echo's ears perked, his amber eyes tracking the bounce with a flicker of curiosity that pierced his guarded veil, his tail giving a single hesitant wag like a flag of truce in a long war. She laughed then, a sound rusty and surprising, bubbling up from depths she thought sealed the warmth spreading through her chest, as if the cabin itself exhaled in relief. He chased it cautiously, at first paws skittering on the wood, but soon bounded with a playful nip, his body uncoiling in rare abandon, the scars on his flank seeming less stark in the light. The space-transformed shadows retreated, the air filled with the soft thuds and her encouraging whispers, "Good boy," each word a spark that kindled mutual ease. Safety bloomed in small gestures, her hand hovering near without touch, his form relaxing into a sprawl. And for the first time, the cabin felt not like a fortress, but a haven, their laughter and warmth a fragile light piercing the melancholy fog outside. In this shared spark, trust flickered alive, a quiet revolution against their isolation, promising more dawns where joy could take root. The cabin's evening hush wrapped around Lily like a threadbare blanket, the fire's embers glowing like dying stars in the hearth, casting flickering shadows that played across the walls in a dance of tentative peace. She sat on the floor, back against the couch knees, drawn up her fingers, idly tracing patterns in the rug, a habit born of restless solitude, her internal monologue a quiet stream of wonder. How did we get here, from shadows to this fragile shared space? Echo lay in his corner, his massive form a coiled silhouette, amber eyes half-lidded but ever watchful, the scars on his flank rising and falling with each measured breath. The air held the faint scent of wood smoke and damp fur, a comforting veil over the town's lingering fog outside, where mysteries whispered but dared not intrude. Days had blurred into this rhythm, her offering food, him accepting from a distance, their bond a slow unfurling, like vines creeping toward light. But tonight something shifted. The fire popped, sending sparks aloft like fleeting hopes, and Echo stirred, his ears twitching as if attuned to an inner call. He rose slowly, paused, padding softly across the floor, each step a deliberate choice, his gaze locked on hers, not with wariness, but a soft intensity that made her heart stutter. Why now, she thought, breath-catching as he approached unbidden, his muzzle lowering to nudge her hand, warm and insistent, a gesture of surrender that cracked open the dam of her guarded emotions. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and unbidden, as his head rested against her thigh, the weight of him real and grounding his fur, coarse yet yielding under her tentative fingers. No tension rippled through his body. Instead, a low sigh escaped him, vibrating through her like a shared exhale of long-held fears. She stroked his ears, marveling at the silk beneath the scars, her sobs coming soft and cathartic, washing away layers of isolation in waves that mirrored the rain pattering against the window. Echo leaned in further, his body pressing close, a solid warmth against her side, licking her wrist with a rough tongue that tasted of salt and trust, full emotional surrender in that simple act, his eyes closing in contentment, as if saying, "Finally, we are not alone." The moment stretched cinematic in its intimacy, the fire's glow haloing them like a benediction, her internal voice whispering gratitude amid the vulnerability. He's chosen me as I've chosen him, our broken pieces fitting in this quiet mosaic. The cabin's newfound warmth began to fray at the edges as twilight bled into night, the fog outside thickening like congealing blood against the windows. Lily stirred a pot on the stove, the aroma of stew mingling with the sharp tang of unease that prickled her skin, her internal monologue brushing it off as remnants of old paranoia. It's nothing, just the town playing tricks. But Echo, lounging by the fire, suddenly stiffened his ears, shooting upright like sentinels, body freezing in primal alertness. A low growl rumbling deep in his chest like thunder echoing from a distant storm. The shift was subtle yet electric. His amber eyes darted to the door, nostrils flaring at scents only he could detect, the air humming with unspoken tension that mirrored the echoes of his abusive past. Outside, a faint rustle leaves or something more stirred the silence, foreshadowing a threat rooted in forgotten traumas, his posture a statue of vigilance that sent chills racing up Lily's spine. He rose slowly, hackles rising like shadows come alive, pacing to the window with a stillness that belied the fury coiled within his growl, intensifying as if sensing the dark force's insidious approach. Her heart quickened, the peace shattering like fragile glass, as Echo's instincts, honed by betrayal and survival, foreshadowed the resurgence of peril, the cabin's sanctuary turning claustrophobic under the weight of impending dread. A knock shattered the cabin's fragile equilibrium, sharp as a fracture in ice, sending Echo into a frenzy of protective fury, his lips curling back to reveal teeth like jagged memories. A snarl ripping from his throat that vibrated the air like a storm's prelude. Lily froze, spoon hovering mid-air, her pulse thundering as James stood at the door, his friendly facade cracking under the weight of unspoken secrets, his eyes darting nervously to the dog whose aggression rooted in depths she could only glimpse. "Just checking in," he said, voice laced with evasion, but Echo lunged forward on stiff legs, hackles, a ridge of shadowed spikes, his growl escalating to a bark that echoed the violence of his past chains, clanking in dark sheds, fists falling like rain, a master's betrayal that had left him shattered. Flashbacks assaulted Lily in tandem, her own loss, a figure vanishing into the night, grief exploding anew as Echo's protective stance triggered her panic, hands trembling as she gripped the table, internal monologue screaming, "He's sensing it, the darkness I've run from now, here in flesh." The room thickened with emotion, James stepping back, his face paling as he muttered, "That dog, he knows things," revealing glimpses of the vanished neighbor's abuse, the scars on Echo's soul mirroring the town's hidden rot. Lily's shout erupted unbidden, "Get back," aimed at both man and memory, her body flooding with adrenaline, tears blurring vision as Echo positioned himself between them, his maternal instinct flaring like a guardian flame against the encroaching chill. Recognition dawned in fragments, James's secretive glances tied to the dark force stalking her, Echo's snarl, a recognition of shared tormentors, the air heavy with the metallic scent of fear and sweat. Panic-crested Lily collapsing to her knees, hands burying in Echo's fur for anchor as sobs racked her, the dog's body tense, yet unyielding, his presence, a shield against the emotional torrent. James retreated, door slamming like a sealed tomb, leaving the cabin reverberating with aftermath. Echo's pants ragged, Lily's whispers of apology mingling with his whines, their traumas laid bare in an explosive convergence that cracked open old wounds. The past bared its teeth through them, both aggression and vulnerability, intertwining a raw exposure that deepened their bond, even as it threatened to unravel it. Night cloaked the town in inky velvet, the fog slithering like serpents through the trees, carrying whispers that set Echo's ears twitching before Lily even sensed the shift. A figure emerged from the mist-shrouded path, silhouetted against the cabin's porch light. A man from her buried past, his face twisted in the same malice that had driven her to flee, eyes gleaming with unresolved vendetta tied to the grief she'd entombed. Echo's reaction was instantaneous, primal, a thunderous bark erupting as he bolted to the door, body slamming against the wood like a battering ram, his scars seeming to pulse with remembered agony from the vanished neighbor's similar cruelty. Lily's heart seized, internal monologue fracturing. "It's him, the shadow that stole everything, now here to claim more," as the man pounded on the door, voice slurring demands through the barrier. "You can't hide forever, Lily." The confrontation ignited raw and electric. She cracked the door chain taut like her nerves, facing the abuser, whose connection to the town's secrets, James's hushed warnings, the disappeared owner, unraveled in heated accusations. Echo forced his way forward, muzzle thrusting into the gap, teeth bared in a snarl that vibrated the air, his protective fury a mirror to the violence he'd endured, muscles rippling under fur as he snapped at the intruder's hand. Night cloaked the town in inky velvet, the fog slithering like serpents through the trees, carrying whispers that set Echo's ears twitching before Lily even sensed the shift. A figure emerged from the mist-shrouded path, silhouetted against the cabin's porch light, a man from her buried past, his face twisted in the same malice that had driven her to flee, eyes gleaming with unresolved vendetta tied to the grief she'd entombed. Echo's reaction was instantaneous, primal, a thunderous bark erupting as he bolted to the door, body slamming against the wood like a battering ram, his scars seeming to pulse with remembered agony from the vanished neighbor's similar cruelty. Lily's heart seized, internal monologue fracturing. "It's him, the shadow that stole everything, now here to claim more," as the man pounded on the door, voice slurring demands through the barrier. "You can't hide forever, Lily." The confrontation ignited raw and electric. She cracked the door chain taut like her nerves, facing the abuser whose connection to the town's secrets, James's hushed warnings, the disappeared owner, unraveled in heated accusations. Echo forced his way forward, muzzle thrusting into the gap, teeth bared in a snarl that vibrated the air, his protective fury a mirror to the violence he'd endured, muscles rippling under fur as he snapped at the intruder's hand. Dawn's reluctant light filtered through the fog like a thief slipping into shadows, but the cabin's sanctuary felt tainted, the air humming with an undercurrent of menace that set Lily's nerves alight. She paced the creaking floors, coffee cup clutched like a talisman, her internal monologue a torrent of unease. "It's not over." The silence is too heavy, like breath held before a scream. Echo mirrored her restlessness, his paws clipping rhythmic warnings as he circled the room, ears pivoting toward every rustle outside, the snap of a twig under unseen weight, the faint crunch of leaves that could be wind or footsteps stalking closer. The town's fog thickened unnaturally, swirling against the windows like exhaled breaths from a lurking giant carrying whispers of pine and decay that prickled her skin with gooseflesh. Subtle signs accumulated like gathering storm clouds. A distant howl cut short Echo's hackles, rising in silent alarm, his amber eyes fixed on the door as if piercing the veil to the threat beyond. James's earlier warnings echoed in her mind, cryptic fragments tying the dark force to her past, a loss not accidental but orchestrated, now circling back with predatory patience. Echo's body language spoke volumes, tail low and stiff, a low whine escaping as he nudged her leg, urging vigilance, his instincts a primal radar honed by survival's harsh lessons. The uneasiness built in layers, the clock's tick amplified to a heartbeat, shadows lengthening across the walls, like fingers reaching inward, the scent of impending rain mingling with something metallic, ominous. Lily's gaze darted to the forest's edge, visible through the pane where branches swayed without wind animal chatter, falling eerily silent, as if the woods themselves held their breath. The fog parted like torn flesh, revealing the dark force in its raw, unrelenting form, the man from Lily's past, his face a mask of twisted rage emerging from the tree line with a glint of metal in his hand that caught the cabin's light like a predator's eye. He advanced with deliberate menace, boots crunching leaves in a rhythm that echoed the heartbeat of impending doom, his voice slicing through the air. "This ends now, Lily, you and that mutt." The confrontation erupted, visceral and unavoidable, the air thickening with the acrid scent of sweat and malice as he kicked the door inward, splintering wood like brittle bones, forcing Lily to stagger back, her scream caught in her throat. Echo exploded into action, a blur of black and tan fury, positioning himself as a living barrier, his snarls a thunderous warning that vibrated the walls. But the intruder pressed on, swinging a makeshift weapon, a crowbar that whistled through the space, grazing Echo's flank and drawing a yelp that pierced Lily's soul. Physical decline set in swiftly. Echo's leg buckled from the blow, blood matting his fur like dark ink on parchment, his breaths coming in labored gasps, yet his eyes burned with unyielding loyalty, refusing to yield ground. In the cabin's maelstrom of splintered wood and heaving breaths, time fractured into a singular crystalline instant where choice crystallized like frost on a blade. Lily cornered against the wall, her eyes locking on Echo's bloodied form as he struggled to rise, the intruder's crowbar poised mid-swing like fate's pendulum. Who protects whom? The question thundered in her mind, a whirlwind of fear and ferocity, her internal monologue a defiant roar. No more running. He's my shield now, I'm his. With a surge of raw courage, she lunged forward, grabbing a fallen poker from the hearth, its iron cold and unyielding in her grip, and swung it with all her fractured strength, connecting with the assailant's shoulder in a crack that echoed like breaking chains. The action was decisive, transformative. The man staggered, surprise etching his face as he released Echo the dog, collapsing but alive, his amber eyes meeting hers in a gaze of profound gratitude that sealed their mutual salvation. The cabin exhaled slowly, the shattered door propped shut with a chair, its splintered frame a testament to the storm that had passed, leaving behind a profound stillness that draped over everything like a soft veil. Lily moved with deliberate languor, her hands bandaging Echo's wound with gauze that whispered against his fur, each wrap a gentle affirmation of survival, the air scented with antiseptic and the faint metallic tang of blood now staunched. Echo lay sprawled on the rug, his massive chest rising and falling in measured rhythms, amber eyes half closed in weary contentment, the tension of battle ebbing away like tide from shore. No words filled the space. Instead, the quiet spoke volumes, the distant drip of fog from eaves, the hearth's embers crackling faintly, long sentences of silence punctuated by their shared breaths, drawing out the emotional pause like a held note in a symphony's fade. She settled beside him back against the wall, her fingers trailing idly through his mane, the motion minimal and soothing, as if any haste might shatter this fragile return to equilibrium. Days blurred into a steady rhythm of recovery, the cabin transforming into a cocoon where time moved like honey, slow and golden, allowing Lily and Echo to weave their healing in tandem through small, repeated acts that spoke louder than any declaration. She began with the basics, offering food from her palm, her fingers steady as Echo's muzzle brushed her skin, his tongue lapping tentatively at first, then with growing assurance the warmth of his breath a sensory anchor that grounded her fluttering heart. He followed her now, not out of obligation, but choice, paws padding softly behind as she moved from kitchen to hearth, his presence a shadow-turned companion mirroring her steps with a loyalty that echoed her own budding dependence. The bond deepened in these interwoven moments, her humming a forgotten tune while cleaning his wound, the melody weaving through the air like threads mending fabric, his ears perking in response, body relaxing under her touch as scars softened under repeated care. The first blush of dawn painted the fog in hues of rose and gold, a quiet herald, as Lily pushed open the cabin door, the cool air kissing her skin like a forgiven secret. Echo stood beside her, his form solid and unhesitant, amber eyes lifting to meet hers, in a gaze that held no shadows, only the steady light of unwavering trust. She stepped forward, and he matched her stride seamlessly, their movements a synchronized ballet, her hand dangling loose at her side, his head brushing against it with each step, the contact electric yet serene, a spark of connection that ignited emotional release in waves. Breath mingled in the crisp morning, hers deep and freeing his warm puffs against her fingers like whispers of rebirth, the motion intimate and profound. No leash, no command, just the natural weave of paw and foot on the dew-kissed path. Fear's grip dissolved in that walk, total trust, manifesting in the subtle lean of his body toward hers, a symbolic gesture that marked the end of isolation's reign. Yet in Lily's mind, a faint shadow lingered, an echo of unresolved mysteries. The dark force, perhaps not vanquished, but subdued, a reminder that healing carried its own quiet vigilance. As they ventured into the light side by side, the world unfolded anew, their bond a living emblem of triumph over the abyss.